Well, I just finished up a 48-hour fast and it was amazing. And in this video, I'm gonna break down exactly what happens on an hour-by-hour basis as you go through this sort of fast. And at the end, I'm gonna go through my top strategies to get the most out of your fast and answer the most frequently asked questions that I get about fasting. So let's start, let's get into this. Well, at 12 hours, right? This is kind of the minimum fast I recommend everybody do. So at 12 hours between your last meal and then your first meal the next day. So if you finish dinner at, let's say, 7 or 8 p.m., you would fast, eat nothing with calories till at least 7 or 8 a.m. the next day. Now you can drink water, you can drink non-caloric beverages, so water, herbal tea, black coffee, but make sure you're not consuming calories. And what happens there at 12 hours, your gut and your liver go through a complete detox cycle. That is so important. If you're eating within that 12 hours, you're putting excess mechanical stress on the gut, damaging the gut lining, allowing for what we call leaky gut or intestinal permeability, which allows these endotoxins to get into the bloodstream from the gut, as well as bacteria and different pathogens and undigested food particles, and that drives up inflammation in the body. It also causes an incomplete liver detox cycle, which means more chemicals are gonna get back out in the bloodstream. Our liver's not gonna be able to deactivate them, and so they're gonna be out in the bloodstream, causing more oxidative stress and inflammation. So 12 hours is the very minimum that you should be doing every single day. Now, what I really recommend is more of a 14 to 16 hour daily fast, okay? And what happens there is your insulin and your blood sugar lower. Insulin is what takes sugar molecules out of the bloodstream and puts them into cells. This is really key because when we eat food, particularly higher glycemic foods, right, which could even be real foods like fruits and stuff like that, our blood sugar elevates. And when blood sugar elevates, those sugar molecules will actually bind to proteins in your bloodstream and create something called advanced glycation end products, AGEs. These AGEs will actually be like shrapnel going through your bloodstream where they'll damage all the major blood vessels. And so insulin's job is to take the sugar molecules out and put them into cells where they can be used for energy. This puts us into sugar burning mode. Insulin stops us from burning fat. Now, for short periods of time, this is great. Like after a meal, we need more insulin in order to keep our blood sugar stable. However, on a daily basis, we want to make sure we get our insulin levels down so we can burn fat for fuel. And so for most people, they're going to get their insulin down pretty low within that 14 to 16 hour fasting range. And that's going to allow for really good fat burning. So the body's going to be burning fat effectively. And then as we move into like a 16 to 20 hour fast, which is a great strategy to do at least a few times a week, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, bump it up beyond 16 hours. Now we start shifting into healing the gut microbiome, right? And so we talked about how when we're eating on a consistent basis, snacking throughout the day, or not allowing for a 12-hour overnight fast, that we create all this mechanical stress that damages the gut. Between 16 to 20 hours, we see a full shifting in our gut microbiome. So we actually get more diversity in the gut microbiome. And we get a reduction in primary feeding bacteria that live above the gut mucosa. These primary feeding bacteria are high in LPS or endotoxins. And so when the primary feeders, when they start to die down, and the secondary feeders that live deep within the mucosa, these are things like Akkermansia muciniphila, which is associated with great metabolic health and longevity. When they start to rise, we start to get a reduction in LPS in our system. And that's really key for overall good metabolic health, right? And it's key for longevity, for anti-aging. So we start to see this shifting take place between that 16 to 20 hours of fasting. This is why I recommend doing something like a 16, 18, maybe a 20-hour fast a few times a week, 2 or 3 times a week. And then between 20 and 24 hours, this is when we start really ramping up ketone production. You see, the body, when it's burning fat, the fat can be fueled for most of the cells in our body. However, fatty acids, we can't get across the blood-brain barrier. And as our sugar goes down, we need to get some sort of good fuel source into the neurons, into the brain cells. And this is why our liver will take fatty acids and turn them into ketones. Ketones are water-soluble molecules that cross the blood-brain barrier and they're a great fuel source for the neurons. But on top of that, they also are what we call epigenetic modulators. So they actually modulate the genetic expression of all the cells in our brain. They shut down brain inflammation. We know brain inflammation is at the root of things like depression, anxiety, increased irritability and cravings, as well as things like neurodegenerative conditions, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia. So the more we can keep inflammation under control in our brain, the better off we're going to be. And these ketones have been shown to upregulate something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is like Miracle Grow for your brain. BDNF helps enhance synaptic activity in your brain, all the little gaps between neurons, which gives you greater flexibility of thought, greater creativity, greater strategic thinking, and greater planning. And so it really just enhances your quality of life. And so this is why so many people will tell me that they come up with like their best ideas when they're in this sort of fasted state, 20 to 24 hours, or sometimes even longer. It's because of this elevation in brain-derived neurotropic factor. On top of that, the ketones will actually create balance in glutamate and GABA. You see, glutamate is like the gas pedal in your brain, right? And so in order to activate function, we need glutamate. But we also need brakes on the brain, and that's where GABA comes in. GABA is like the brakes, so we don't, like you're driving a car, you don't want to run into a wall. Well, excess glutamate activity actually excites the neurons to death. We call it excitoneurotoxicity. And so we don't want excess glutamate. It needs to be balanced with GABA. GABA helps calm the brain. When we have too much glutamate, we end up with anxiety, irritability. We just get set off so easily, right? We're like hypervigilant, we're anxious, and over time we can become depressed because so many neurons actually become damaged and die, and so we're not even get really good neuronal activity taking place. So GABA helps balance that. GABA is great for really good sleep, helps calm our brain, a state of peace and relaxation, and that's what happens as we start getting this elevation in ketones in our brain. We're bringing down brain inflammation, we're enhancing the brain as it rewires and undergoes neuroplasticity, and we're balancing out the glutamate to GABA pathways. Now, as we move beyond one full day, 24 to 36 hours, we start to get the intestinal cell reset. So bad intestinal cells that have a bunch of damaged mitochondria, we call these zombie cells. These cells are taking up space, but really not doing anything productive. Our body starts to eliminate these at this point. We start to get rid of some of these zombie cells in our intestines, and they're removed, and now new stem cells replace them. And so we start to develop the stem cells that are replacing these damaged cells. So stem cells are going to be real stress resilient, high mitochondrial function, great energy production. And that's key. In our intestines, we want those enterocytes to be as stress resilient as possible, because every time we eat food, we are actually creating stress, mechanical stress on the intestinal lining. So we need as stress resilient cells as possible along the intestinal lining. And so getting rid of the bad cells, adding in the new cells, the new good healthy cells, helps keep food, bacteria, and endotoxins from getting into the bloodstream and driving up inflammation in the body. Also, around 24 hours, we get this huge rise in human growth hormone, up to 2,000% in men and 1,300% in women. What is growth hormone? Growth hormone is our quintessential anti-aging hormone. It helps us burn fat, build muscle. It helps regenerate collagen within our skin, our hair, our nails. So it helps reduce fine lines and wrinkles on our face and on our skin. It helps reduce the effects of aging on our skin. It also helps regenerate joints. We want really great HGH production. We do that through good sleep habits, as well as kind of a regular 24-hour, roughly 24 to 48-hour fast. Doing that on a kind of a regular to semi-regular basis will really drive up HGH levels. So that's key. On top of that, as we move into 36 to 48 hours, we get deeper levels of ketosis. Autophagy start to kick in. What is autophagy? That's when our body starts to break down old, damaged cells and cellular organelles like mitochondria, and starts to actually regenerate them. It takes the raw materials and actually creates new, healthy, stress-resilient mitochondria. We also start producing more mitochondria. We call this mitochondrial biogenesis. And the amount of high-functioning, stress-resilient mitochondria in the cells of your body, so ultimately the quality of our life is going to come down to the amount of high-functioning, stress-resilient mitochondria in the cells of our body. The more high-functioning, stress-resilient mitochondria in our cells, the more stress-resilient we're going to be mentally, emotionally, physically, right? We're going to be able to function at a really high level. So we want to do everything we can to boost mitochondrial health. A 24 to 48 hour fast can be one of the best things you do to help support overall mitochondrial health by getting rid of damaged mitochondria and undergoing this process of autophagy and mitophagy and replacing those with new, healthy, stress-resilient mitochondria. So now you guys can see this is what happens. It's an amazing thing that takes place as you're going through a 48-hour fast. This is how your body literally heals and regenerates itself. Our ancestors didn't have to think about it because they didn't have pantries and refrigerators. They either hunted well and feasted, or they had to fast. They would go periods of time where sometimes they would have to go days without food because they didn't have food available. In our society today, food is always available, so we have to be more intentional about it. But undergoing something like a 48-hour fast once a week or once a month can be extremely beneficial for your overall healing process. Now, let's go into some of your most frequently asked questions. Well, number one is, what can you drink during the fast? So when we're doing this fast, we're not eating, but we can drink. We can drink water, we can drink herbal tea, we can drink black coffee. Now, if any of those things cause you to have more cravings, like black coffee, for example, for some individuals, they don't feel good. They're slow caffeine metabolizers. They don't feel good when they drink black coffee. It makes them feel worse, and the fast is harder. If that's you, don't drink the coffee. But if you feel good, if you feel more mentally clear, you're able to perform well, you just feel good, you can drink coffee. I wouldn't recommend more than 2 cups of coffee in a day on this sort of fast, and make sure that you cut it off by 2 p.m. so you can have a really good sleep later on that night. And that includes other caffeinated beverages like green tea, for example, as well. So you don't want to overdo your caffeine. That will cause a rise in your blood sugar. So you want to keep your caffeine to, roughly under 200 milligrams a day in divided doses. And that can really help support you during a fast. Most people I know, about 80% tell me the coffee helps them with the fast. And then there's about 20% that tell me the coffee actually makes the fasting harder. They don't feel good when they're doing it. So if you're in part of that 20%, just avoid coffee. But you can drink water, you can drink herbal tea. You can also put apple cider vinegar in your water. That's great. That's not going to break a fast. So you can do apple cider vinegar in water, like a tablespoon and 4 to 8 ounces of water, so it's diluted. And that works great during a fast as well. And that'll actually help enhance mitochondrial function in your intestines, because apple cider vinegar has something called acetic acid, which is a postbiotic from bacterial fermentation, kind of similar to what our gut produces, and that will help support mitochondrial healing in the intestinal lining. So that can actually be beneficial there. What you want to avoid are anything with calories. So even if it's like butter, heavy cream, MCT oil, when we're trying to get the best benefits of this fast, it's better to avoid those things. If you have to do something, doing something like butter or coconut oil or MCT oil would be a lot better than pretty much anything else. So if you needed some sort of fat, maybe you just really didn't feel good, usually just taking a little bit of salt, right? Taking a little bit of electrolytes like some salt and drinking water, that usually gets rid of brain fog, low energy. That really helps you. However, if you felt like you needed something like maybe a little bit like a teaspoon of MCT oil can really help get more ketones elevated in your brain so you feel good. So if you're new to fasting, it can be a little bit tough, right? As your body transitions from burning sugar to burning fat, you might notice that you have more cravings, you feel fatigued, you feel like you've got brain fog or a headache or something like that. Usually the best thing to do is just take a little bit of salt, put it on your finger and put it on your mouth, and then drink water. The salt, the electrolytes are so key because as your insulin levels drop, so insulin, not only is it a fat storage hormone, but also it helps us retain sodium. And as insulin drops while we're fasting, now we're gonna actually excrete the sodium. And so we need to replace it. So taking some salt, putting it on your tongue, or drinking like a little bit of salt water or pickle brine, kind of the what's in like the fermentation process of the pickles, just the water itself, drinking that will provide the sodium. And for most people, they notice they feel a lot better, right? And they're able to continue on with their fast. For some people, taking a little bit of MCT oil can be helpful because that turns quickly into ketones, especially if it's C8 only MCT oil. Now, if you're an experienced faster, you know, okay, there might be short periods of, kind of a short wave of not feeling great or having more hunger or cravings, particularly around the time when you would normally eat. But it goes away pretty quick, especially if you hydrate well and you're able to just kind of continue on with your fast. So ultimately, fasting is like a muscle, right? The more we train it, the better we get at it. Now, speaking of muscles, people ask me, can I exercise during a 48-hour fast? And the answer is yes and no. So it depends on what you call exercise. I would recommend walking for sure, doing low intensity exercise. So whether it's taking a long walk, doing multiple walks, that's great. You want to do the low intensity exercise. When it comes to high intensity exercise, like strength training, like building muscle kind of training, or running sprints, high intensity interval training, so some sort of HIIT type training, I would only recommend doing it if you feel good right near the end of your fast. So let's say hour 47, you get a great workout in. Okay, if you're feeling good, get a great workout in, and then go ahead after that, break your fast with a meal. That's gonna provide the nutrients you need to recover properly. Other than that, I definitely recommend lots of walking, lots of low intensity movement. And then if you want to add in strength training, it's great. It's best done right at the end of your fast. So your growth hormone will be maximally elevated there right at the end of your fast. That will help you perform even better during your training session and get even better benefits out of it. So that's great. Now, another question I get is, should you take medications while fasting? And that's going to be really a question that you have with your prescribing doctor. I can't give you medical advice here. So always talk about that with your medical doctor. Some medications, you really need to tailor. For example, if you're on diabetes medication or blood pressure medication, as you're doing a fast like this, your blood sugar and your blood pressure are gonna lower. And therefore, if you're taking the same dosage of medication, you may end up with hypoglycemia or hyponatremia, where you have too low blood pressure, right? So you don't want that, right? So it's definitely important to talk with your doctor about whatever medications you're taking and get their advice as far as if you should continue with those or if you should cut the dosages and how that works. Now, how about supplements? Can you take supplements with a fast? The answer is yes and no. In general, I say, for the most part, you can just not consume supplements. There's no need for supplements during this sort of fast. However, if you do want to take some supplements, electrolytes can be helpful. Magnesium, extra magnesium can be really helpful. Maybe some adaptogenic herbs like ashwagandha, rhodiola, holy basil or tulsi, right? Something along those lines can be helpful for just helping you adapt to the stress of the fast. And for some people, they notice benefits there. Also a good binder, like for example, activated charcoal or something like fulvic humic acid, something like zeolite. That can be helpful for binding to chemicals and toxins that are being released into your system as your body burns through fat. So those can be really helpful as far as supplements go. A good high quality binder like a fulvic humic acid based binder or a zeolite or something along those lines. We've got some great ones on my online store, GI Detox, biotoxin binder, HMET binder for binding metals. It's a great time to really enhance the detoxification process. These binders bind, pull toxins and help eliminate them from your body. So really good strategies there. But in general, you don't actually need supplements. How much water should you drink? Really, you should be drinking roughly about a gallon of water a day is usually what I recommend, something like that, and just kind of spread out throughout the day. Obviously, you're not going to drink all of it at once. Spread out throughout the day and then limiting it at night, the last 2 hours before you go to bed. So hopefully this is helpful. Guys, if you have not done a 48-hour fast, go ahead and start doing that. Try that out. Get some medical advice or work with your functional health practitioner before doing it, but try it out and let me know in the comments if you've done a fast like this. Let me know in the comments below your experience with it. Would love to know more about your experience, and Yeah, God bless you. We'll see you in a future video training.